Awesome. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you to these amazing group of panelists up here. Excited to dive in, and I'm going to go right ahead. I think the first question is, you have had incredible careers as coaches, and would love to hear, maybe we start at the end there with BJ on, can you just touch on a defining moment in your career, whether that the moment you decided to become a coach or continue to push that forward, or, yeah?
Sure. Oh, does it work? First, thanks for having us and including us in this obviously huge and general meeting here, and thinking of us coaches. So for me, I would say there's sort of what got me into coaching was my grandfather was a basketball coach for Villanova University, so I think it was always something in my family that coaching was looked at as like a good career, and something that your parents would send you to college for and be okay if you came out of college being a coach. So I think I take huge inspiration from that. In terms of like a defining moment, I started at basically on the, I guess you could say, on the backs of everything that the members here provide. So I came out of college, I earned a D license through the EPYSA coaching thing, was able to go do DCBA up to the pro, and I was able to start coaching at the U9, 10, and 11 boys and girls programs in the Eastern Pennsylvania and go on to ODP and then the regional side. So that's where I got my first start. And then I also entered into the college side. And I would say that defining moment came as I was the associate head coach at Villanova. And I would say there'd be days that I would sit in the office and I'd be like, I feel like empty, right? Like, it wasn't that I was unhappy at my job. I really enjoyed it, but I just felt empty. So I took a risk, and I went down to this program called the YSC Academy, and what the Philadelphia Union was starting before all of that was there. And they had opened a school, and there was 8 students, and there was 3 of us, and we coached these 8 kids. And for me, that was like, wow, right? Like personal, individual development. They went to school. Well, they came to us in the morning. They went to school, they saw us again in the afternoon, and that personal relationships that you were able to really build with the players, I think gave me fulfilled that emptiness, and then that sort of was a catalyst to kind of get back, into the youth side, into an academy side, and then sort of propelled me onto where we are now.
I would actually echo some of those sentiments. Coming through and being able to be involved in so many different environments, and we talk about the ecosystem, but just different ways of coaching, whether it's youth director, college coaching, and then being involved with U.S. Soccer from a technical advisor standpoint. And I think one of the most defining moments was probably twofold, and consequently working with the 17s last year, throughout the CONCACAF and throughout the World Cup in India, and then being able to use that experience jumping onto the beach side and working with the beach soccer team and meeting some incredible women and quickly finding out how driven they are in terms of trying to define the sport and expose the sport to more and more people. And I think being able to take the experience that I had with the 17s, some of the structure that we have there, how we built the culture with that team, and then starting to implement that with the beach soccer team and the culture there. It's been an incredible experience throughout the last 2 years. Coming into this final year of going into World Beach Games qualifiers, coming out, qualifying for World Beach Games, then immediately leaving the next day, even though we had a few players sick from El Salvador, going straight into a competition in Mexico and coming out winning that competition in Mexico. So going to 2 major competitions back to back and then coming out with some pretty good results. So that might have been the most defining.
Okay. So those are such good stories. And I think for me, I actually always knew I wanted to be a coach, so there was no confusion there. I knew when I was done playing that I would coach. And then there were all these steps along the way, some of which you guys have touched on, and it's overlapped with some of your roles here in terms of club and ODP and different things. For me, all those defining moments are things that usually happen after the fact in hindsight that you recognize them. But most recently, I would say, it was just saying yes to opportunity. So I don't think I've actually shared this story, but part of my involvement to get on Vladko's staff originally was saying yes to an opportunity that I actually didn't want to say yes to. I was in 2002, January, I was getting ready for my 3rd season in the NWSL. I was exhausted, recently married, had just finished the pro license, doing all those things in the same year. It was just a lot. And then suddenly, US Soccer called and said, hey, we had a coach take another job. Would you be willing to be the head coach in like 8 days for the U23 national team? And I just wasn't ready personally. I was exhausted. But I took some time to reflect and realized these opportunities don't come along very often, and very grateful, and decided to say yes. And then I promptly figured out that I was actually coaching against Vlatko, and it was the 23s versus the full national team. So I quickly prepared and really was about the football, making sure I was crossing my T's, dotting my I's, things like that. And then I got there and I realized it was a really good plan, but actually the group, the players and the staff weren't ready for that plan. And it was overwhelming to be playing against the full team. So I then had to back up. And that was a defining moment because I had to decide not just to say yes in the first place, but to do it my way. And it went really well. And it was really enjoyable, and I actually left that camp more refreshed than I went into it because I was my authentic self. And it just so happened that in the background, US Soccer was raising the funds to put into place the first full-time second assistant on the women's national team, and it was offered to me after that. So I say yes, and I'm in the middle of my second big yes, and I hope that it's also a defining moment.
Hi, everyone. I've had plenty of memorable moments with the para team, and for those of you that don't know, the US para national team is for players that have cerebral palsy or have suffered a traumatic brain injury. So just for those of you that aren't familiar with our team, I will probably just echo everyone else's sentiments, actually. When I think back on defining moments, similar to Twila, there was never a moment where I decided to be a coach. I think it was somehow woven into the fabric of my soul. There was never an epiphany like, oh, I should be a coach. It just seemed like that's the natural pathway for me, maybe because I come from a family of teachers or something like that, similar to BJ. I do remember the first time I felt like I was around like-minded people around 2008 or 2009, people that wanted to grow and learn and completely immerse themselves in the game, and that's what I did for the better part of a decade in terms of saying yes to everything, and end up in coaching in lots of different environments, holding DOC roles, technical director roles, running the Iowa ODP program, things like that. And then I think maybe about 4 years ago, there was another defining moment where you kind of realize, well, maybe I can't say yes to absolutely everything, and you've got to kind of take a step back and think about, okay, what's truly important? What are the things I should say yes to? And maybe I say that as a husband and a father, and even as I'm actually a mental health therapist too. So, I see a lot of that, and so maybe just the next defining moment was, okay, I'm only going to say yes if I can truly add value, and it's truly going to help me grow as a person, and then I'm considering that cost benefit of family, relationships, and all of that stuff. So that was a good epiphany too. And then you can truly immerse yourselves in the things that you feel you can truly be impactful for.
Amazing. So I've heard, thank you, and I've heard so much about kind of the different environments, the different growth, the different impact that you all can have. I know that in a national team environment, one of the unique things is that you don't get to see these players every day. So how do you think about player development and really kind of pushing forward different player development philosophies, knowing that you do want to have an impact on their growth, their opportunity, their ability to really come together as a team and perform at the highest level? Sure, yeah.
Go back down the line. I'll keep this succinct. Yeah, with our para team, we do have a very limited amount of time with the guys. we'll maybe have 3 or 4 contacts this year before we enter into the World Cup in November. So it's not much. And so I think from a player development perspective, it's what's going on between the camps that's important for us. Our guys aren't playing at a professional level, necessarily environments that prepare you for a World Cup. So we have to do a lot of work between camps to make sure, one, they're physically where they need to be, and our performance coach, Daniel, does a brilliant job of that. But then can we find them environments where they can play competitively, play somewhat close to a level that they're going to be expected to perform at come the World Cup? And that's the most challenging part. And given the limited time, truth be told, we're really developing the team when they get there. Of course, there's individual pieces. That usually comes in the form of individual meetings and IDPs and things like that. But in terms of on the field, it's really, okay, what's our game idea? What principles are we going to prioritize in this camp so that we can help the guys, just maximize that learning time and prepare them as much as possible. So obviously, individual development and player development is very important, but when we're on the grass, it's like, okay, let's get ready to go compete and come home with a medal.
I would say for us, we're more focused on team development, taking the team from through our progressions game by game or tournament by tournament, and individual development is important, but most of that will happen outside of our environment. So we partner with clubs at the professional level, administrator to administrator, coach to coach, high performance to high performance, medical to medical, to make sure that our players are surrounded with the best resources available, that they understand what their individual development plans are and supported in every way. And that takes a lot of communication and some give and take from national teams and also the clubs. And I would just say to any of you that are out coaching youth, the best thing you can do to partner with us for the future is encourage the players that you're coaching to watch the game at a very high level, to continue to work on their technique in tight spaces, but under game-like circumstances, and then allow them to make their own decisions based on your style of play, of course, within the games, because decision-making at the highest level is the most important thing.
Follow. That was a good answer. I would say similar to Ross, so we don't get a chance to get together as much as we'd like, so the way that we've tried to solve that is trying to be as innovative and as creative as possible to get connected with our players. So in between camps, one of the things that we've started to do is we meet every Friday on Zoom. Every other Friday might be a tactical analysis type meeting, whether it's on the priorities of the principals coming up within the camps. The other Fridays are more of a technical session, and I think I was doing an interview last night. I'm kind of giving a brief window into what those technical sessions look like, but you can imagine we do it at 9:30 on the East Coast with some of the players on the West Coast at 6:30 in the morning. They are out on the sand, and I think we have a few players in the audience. One of them wears a little headlamp on her head just so that she can see the sands, and it kind of looks like a little bit of a Blair Witch project going on. But as you can imagine, the players have to be innovative. We have a player that lives in Iceland. She trains in a long jumping pit just so that she can get into the sand and just get some realistic touches onto the ball. So I think for us, it's just figuring out what are the needs of our players, what are the needs of our team, and how do we tackle those needs within the resources that we have. And so it's just continuing to be creative within the resources and the staff that we have.
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what they said. We're all in very similar situations, so the way that we support the team. Specifically with the men's national team, I think when we talk about the individual player, a lot of what we try to do is see the good in the player. So when we talk about player development, we know that we have limited contact time, but if we can see the good and try to bring that out even more in the decisions that we make, the style of play that we use, and the demands that we ask from them, we think it only makes a stronger team. And so I would say in camp, that's a lot of what you're, in an individual side, that's what you're looking at. When we're outside of camp, everything's about contact and communication. So we want to be communicating with the players as much as possible. We want to be supporting them in their clubs as much as possible. How we can do that we scout and watch every single game that they play. And so that takes, and that's us evaluating them, but also being able to give them feedback in, not every week, but in real time about real things that are happening and create those open dialogues. And then from a holistic standpoint, there's also the communication that Twila talked about, where we're able to support their club with some of the things that the club might not have, and in return, the club's able to support us in some of the things that we're not able to have, especially in whether it's in the physical development or off the field type of resources if the player's going through something. So I think it's really looking at it from a holistic standpoint, but for us, it starts with what are they really good at, and let's make it the greatest strength that they possibly can have, and that can be on the field, off the field, physically, in all sort of areas.
I think I've heard a lot about kind of the ways in which kind of there can be really strong partnering across the various members, coaches, et cetera, out in the ecosystem. As we think about some of the major events that are coming up across the board here, what can members, which a lot of the player pool is represented today, what can they do to support the U.S. national team as we move towards these major events that are coming up?
Start from the beach side. We have this conversation often. As you guys probably know, we don't have leagues yet for beach soccer, and I think one of the pieces that we've started to talk about is how do we now weave that into at the club level and the youth level. And I think one of the main pieces that you guys can start to do is finding a way to implement that into your normal periodization. Beach soccer can be used as a type of differential learning, and it's a way to give the variability of getting into the sand. It can maximize and strengthen decision making, obviously bringing balls down out of the air, first touch, transition, all sorts of different things, but in a different type of format and in a different way. So there's a huge amount of benefit in terms of being able to get a player into the sand. Obviously, it helps with burnout and those pieces. So finding ways to then weave that into your periodization, depending on what you guys have available in terms of environment and resources, for us, I think would be a huge help and ways to spread the game and be able to get exposure to that level.
Well, we have quite a few big events coming up, and that's exciting. I'll leave here tomorrow to head to Gold Cup, so I would say let's start there and encourage the people that you're around to watch, if possible, to come out, but also to talk about it. This is going to help stimulate more talk about football, and that's always a good thing in terms of raising up future generations. So I would say that. And then I would just say, over the long run for major events, anytime that we can schedule, not every game because that's not going to be a possibility, but trainings and games around major events, to have a pause and actually watch our national team and kind of cultivate the idea that we're in this together, that we represent everybody and vice versa, that will go a long way for future generations.
I'll keep this simple for our team. For us, it's really, can you help us find players? If you have a player at your club, if you have a player within your state that has cerebral palsy, that's involved with one of the clubs that you help to oversee, that are a player that's has a traumatic brain injury that's actively playing, we would really appreciate reaching out. We can get them connected into the pathway. We're so fortunate now. We used to just have kind of this national team on a pedestal and nothing underneath, but you guys might have saw Ashley Hammond out there doing the disability clinic earlier. We now have somewhat of an actual player pathway that feeds into the national team. And so whether that player is playing for a top ECNL team or is on a B or a C team, we want to know who these players are and figure out if they're eligible and get them connected to our pathway. And because the opportunities are incredible for these guys, and I know transformational is a big word, but getting connected to the CP soccer world, if you're a player with cerebral palsy or traumatic brain injury, can literally be life-changing. It's been life-changing for me, from a perspective of being around the guys and the experiences that I've been able to have, because the guys they're just unbelievable people. They really, really are. And the event we have here coming up in March is called Adapt and Thrive. And there's not a better encapsulation of what these guys are about in terms of adapting and thriving. They're super, super inspirational people. And so if you have someone within your state that might be eligible, let's see if we can get them connected and perhaps give them a transformational opportunity too.
I think for our lens, the greatest thing that we can do is just provide them as much education as possible about the national teams that we all represent. And what I mean by that is they can all be fans of a European team. They can all be fans of their hometown team at any level, but they should all be fans of the national teams. And that's something that I think that we can really rally behind. And I think from the point that Twila makes about having them watch it, but direct them where to watch. A lot of the players that we deal with are European based, so sometimes they can almost become forgotten a little bit, or they're also being compared to the greatest stars in the world. And what I would ask is, if you see the kid watching, Neymar, encourage them to watch Neymar and Christian. And if you see them watching Juventus, encourage them to watch Tim and Weston, and really make these names household names that these players can grow up and emulate. Everyone plays in the backyard and says, oh, it's the World Cup final, 1-1, PK, IM. We want that to be a U.S. men's national team player, or a national team player across all of our national team programs, that's who they're emulating, so that when we go into these competitions and we come, the Nations League comes up and then Copa America comes up, they are fans, they are engaged, and they know the players, and everything about that. And that's how we grow it all the way from the bottom of the 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. We just gently push and nudge them because we know where it'll go. And at the end, they have the access, and we really make the players that we have across all of our platforms household names that are there 365 days a year, not just maybe the 10-day window that we have for March with the Nations League. We really want it to be a 24/7 immersion for everybody.
All right, we'll wrap up. Any final comments for this group? And why don't we start on the far end, BJ? Just final remarks.
I think for me, the only final remarks is when we go into camp, what we always talk about is trying to create a safe environment where these guys can just be themselves. When they are being themselves and when they are together, I can tell you that they're having the most fun that they possibly can have. And so my message back out is, can we make it as much fun playing soccer at whatever level that everyone's at? Because there's nothing better than watching Weston McKinney get a ball 70 yards hit to him and he goes and stands on top of it, right? We've all seen those video clips, and that's because he's just out there playing a game and having fun, and he's at his best when he's doing that. And that comes from the love that's been basically woven into him from the game all the way to the youngest youth levels. And as long as we can make it fun, I think we'll continue to really develop great young soccer players and great people. Whatever path they choose.
Yeah, I think going off of from a beach soccer standpoint, this game allows us to be able to keep people involved in the game longer, and I think this sport allows opportunity for players that maybe never thought they could wear a national team with their name on the back, and the second they step into the sands, and whether they've played at an NWSL level or whether they've played college at Division II, Division III level, you never know how good you can be until you give it a try. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I started to see getting involved with this team and in this sport is the variety of players that are kind of within the squad and within the pool, and the amount of opportunity and gratefulness that the current roster as well as the pool kind of embodies and embraces based on the opportunity that this team gives them. So if you have players that are interested, or if you're interested in finding a way to kind of get involved and kind of weave this into maybe your environment and things like that, please reach out.
My final words will just be thank you. I don't pretend to know the role that each one of you play in the soccer landscape, but I know that you're here because you greatly care about soccer in this country, and you each play a different role in that. Whatever it is, it's vital. This is one of the largest countries of soccer players in the world, and it should be the most preeminent sport that we have here at some point, and that will be directly because of the work that you do in whatever niche you're in, so thank you.
That was really good. She should have went last time.
Next time.
Yeah. Yeah, just to conclude, I want to maybe hopefully reiterate a couple things that we've heard in terms of sort of igniting that love for the game. So whatever influence you guys do have across the youth game within your respective states, I think if there's a way to go back and maybe help examine what's going on with the 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds there, you know, what kind of pathway does that look like, and can we foster an environment that truly ignites a love for the game, a lifelong love for the game, and I don't mean, and maybe even help to flip the paradigm upside down. A lot of our best coaches are with, you know, our U16, 17s, 18s team, and a lot of kids aren't seeing any real magical teachers until they're, you know, 11 and 12, and we're missing a window of development there. I really do feel, and so the last thing I would say is we don't need a coach out there with a whistle and a clipboard yelling at kids and doing a bajillion toe taps, but can we foster brilliant learning environments that ignites a love for the game, that allows them to make decisions like Twila was mentioning earlier, and they're in-game-like situations, and they can figure out how to outplay their direct opponent, or maybe share the ball with their buddy, or, you know, keep the ball in tight spaces, and can we really examine that phase of our pathway? Because ultimately the more kids that love the game and the more kids that have a foundation and are somewhat technically proficient and able to exploit space, then the better chance we're going to be producing players that do have a chance of playing for one of these teams. And so, thank you to you all for your roles. I know that a lot of the roles you hold are not easy, and I know that all of you are away from home right now and things like that. And so thank you for what you do, and go ahead and, you know, anytime you see the para-national team or the beach, the extended national teams, promote those guys on social media as well. The more exposure they get, the better. And, you know, thank you again. And thanks for having me.
Thank you all, and thank you for coming.